record this earlier.
Oh,
And
yeah, go
again,
for it.
we will just share it for people in the class. We won't post this publicly if that's okay.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Right. Okay. So when you were here, were you the TA for or a tutor for Java 1? Or what did you do for, I thought you were something for Java 1.
Yep, I was the tutor for I think 3 years. I was the tutor for Java 1 primarily, and then as I got further along, I ended up tutoring some of like Java 2, and some of the later classes as well.
And some of the students, I don't know if any of the students here know I think it's your younger brother, Wilson, right?
Yep,
Uh,
Wilson, I believe he's speaking with the class next week.
yes, he's talking to the class next week. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So just remember to compare both of us and see who is the more impressive speaker.
Right. Yes, we'll
Yeah.
certainly do that. And
Yeah.
we know that already, obviously, but we'll let Wilson know.
Perfect.
So you want to just start by just talking us about your development environment? What are you on a team? Are you doing agile? Give us a little
Sure.
breakdown, and then we'll have the students try to ask some specific questions because they are busy thinking of specific questions to ask you.
Perfect. Yeah, so I do work on within an agile environment. Currently, I'm on a team of about 12 people. It's kind of fluctuated a little bit. With that large project I kind of mentioned, we had an influx of team members. I had 9 on the team until pretty shortly we had 12. Um, but yeah, when it comes to development, we have uh, developers on the team, testers, and then a dedicated BA, business analyst, for our team that helps with gathering requirements and working with our business, who are our customers, in essence, to make sure that we are developing what they're looking for. And we do follow typical Scrum patterns where we have our daily stand up. We have refinement Monday morning, bright and early at 8 a.m., and then a weekly retro, as well as we do present bi-weekly to our business, kind of our review of here's what we're working on, here's what we're looking to work on, and here's any demos we can provide to kind of get that instant feedback as we go. Um, DigiKey uses multiple different languages, but I primarily work in C Sharp and C++ for some of our legacy code. I saw you guys were working on assignments that looked like you were dealing a lot with C Sharp and APIs. APIs are kind of more of what we do. We have started to dabble into a little bit more of the UI frameworks of Blazor's kind of been our newest one that we've really gotten into, which is C Sharp based. But a lot of what we do is APIs, C Sharp, and recently getting into really the eventing architecture, which I saw there was kind of RabbitMQ on your sheet. I don't think people got to it, so I don't know how much you're in that area, but eventing has recently kind of taken over, and we've been embracing it fully on the team.
You want to tell us, since the students don't know what manager
Sure.
are. They don't know what a listener is really. I mean, they do a little bit. We've seen it in some places, but you want to just tell us, what is a typical way you might use an event system? Because I'm assuming you have, we're calling them different microservices that are communicating back
Yeah.
and forth.
Yeah. So, just to kind of briefly talk about like the traditional way of doing things. Traditionally, when you're wanting multiple different areas of a company to be notified that something's happened, you end up having a single service calling out to multiple API endpoints, basically saying, "Hey, like let's say an order was placed, we need to authorize their credit card, call and do that. We need to instruct the warehouse that they need to start picking parts, call and do that." But the problem is the scalability of that gets to be really difficult, as well as how long it takes. For instance, our company wanted to start checking for fraud, and it involved many, many teams at the company because in order to do that, we had to develop. APIs that had to be consumed by other teams, and they had to figure out where best to slot it in. And it ends up creating a little bit of a spaghetti mess of code where eventing, you basically have a broker in the middle who's kind of organizing everything, and producers and consumers. The producers say, hey, this business process just happened. An order was placed, and they kind of, in my eyes, just shout it from the rooftops instead of telling individual people. And then consumers who are all subscribed with that broker can decide if they care or not. So you can develop a microservice that is checking for fraud, where it's like, oh, an event was put on the broker saying this order has been placed, and because the consumer can care about it, they can just decide, oh, I'm going to consume this and do what I want with it. And this increases scalability by a magnitude where instead of involving every single team that could be involved in the whole process to determine where best to put it, you can have a new microservice like, oh, here's a new process that needs to care. You can spin up a new microservice and use that topic on a broker without needing to involve other teams, including the producer.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's see what exciting questions our students have because they are very good at asking questions. Right, students? All right, let's do Hunter first. What was that? What's a what's an average work day or maybe an average work week if you don't have an exact work, average day?
Sure. So our team works kind of a typical workday from 8 to about 5. At 8 a.m. Every morning, we join and have stand up where we bring up our sprint board that goes through all of the different items we're wanting to look at. And we've gone back and forth on how we do it. We used to go person by person and have them go over what they did the previous day and what they're doing the current day. And we've recently migrated to going a little bit more work item by work item, like, hey, we're doing this development. Who is involved in that and who can speak on what was done yesterday and what's going to be done today? And we found that that's been working pretty well for our team. But from there, we end up kind of breaking out into the different areas. We have multiple developers and multiple testers, so a lot of the times, as development is completing, we're able to kind of just message the team and say, "Hey, which tester is available? Who feels comfortable with testing our changes?" And they join, and we can work through that together. We have team members from across Minnesota and Wisconsin. So we do end up working primarily in a remote environment where we end up just we have Microsoft Teams, but we sit on a Microsoft Teams call all day and can just break out into different breakout rooms as we need to. But other than that, we end up we like DigiKey has a change management board that coordinates all the changes we want to go live. So depending on if changes are ready at that time, we can delegate someone to go and speak on the changes that we're proposing to put into production and outline plans there. But for the most part, once we get through stand up, it's a little bit of free reign on what needs to be done, how do we get there, and work with team members to kind of reach our 1 week sprint goal.
So where are you physically right now? Are you in Thief River Falls? You're in the Twin Cities?
I live about an hour north of the Twin Cities at this point. I do work fully remote. We do have an office in Bloomington that I go to very occasionally. There are kind of meetups and get-togethers that I do. But I've been traveling up to Thief River quite a bit recently for kind of our large project. So I have been in person quite a bit, but I mostly work remotely.
All right. Rylan, did you have a question?
Ask what's like a typical amount of projects that you might have to work on at a time?
Yeah, so are you working on one project at a time, multiple projects? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a little bit skewed right now because of this large replacing a 25-year-old homegrown system, that's kind of taken over the priority where I think we only are currently working on two. But as we're kind of wrapping that up, as that went live in November 1st, we're starting to bring in a little bit more. Typically, DigiKey keeps about, I think currently we're at 10 priority projects that are kind of the larger involving multiple team projects, where, two or three are typically getting the priority to be worked on. As well as we do end up having small projects like, oh, this package that we're all relying on is now obsolete or has a security bug. We need to dedicate a little bit of time to upgrading packages and doing the testing and support of that. So usually three main projects, and then sprinkle in all the requests that you get from other teams to do little things.
Okay. How about another question? Any online students? You can put it in chat or just unmute and ask. Yes, Omar?
When there is a change of the systems that you guys are using, because he mentioned that how they switched to Blazor. Do they give you guys a specific amount of time to adjust to that change? And what happens if someone can't make the adjustment to the change, or he's not
Okay.
as good as he was on the previous one?
Right. So when you're moving to a new technology like your web stuff to Blazor, do you get training? Is there a time frame? How do you learn it? And what if you struggle making that conversion?
Yeah. So there's a couple different avenues here. One, we're on a large enough team where if someone really is not into UI and Blazor, there are other people in the team that are willing to kind of pick that up. And as a team, we kind of just balance that where, as we're kind of looking at doing new work or pulling in a backlog item, someone can say, "Hey, I'm super interested in doing this one." Where, yeah, maybe I'm not as into developing the UI. I'd much rather be working in our C++ backend or whatnot. When it came to Blazor, our team was kind of fortunate in the fact that we were one of the first ones who were starting to look into utilizing the technology. Lucky and also not lucky because we also had to deal with every paper cut on the way. But we were kind of lucky in the fact that we were able to dedicate some time to play around with the technology and slowly work on implementing it in smaller cases before we started moving on to larger ones. And DigiKey does have, at least our IT team has what we call our Center of Practice, I think is what it's, COP, where people can say, "Hey, I have a presentation that I think would be worth telling other teams about and having all of IT involved." So when Blazor was kind of starting to become a thing, I believe, I don't remember if I did it or if I helped with the presentation. It's been a couple of years, but we presented to all of IT saying, "Hey, here's kind of some of the things we've learned by implementing Blazor, and here's the things you can look out for," as well as we do utilize, we have like project templates that we use as a company where, as you learn some of these things, you can contribute to kind of the community template so when other people are looking to implement it, they can have kind of a better base to work off of that kind of fixes any of the gotchas that may trip you up.
Great. I saw Vince asking online, what was the transition like from college to professional coding and development? I often, in my mind, and I tell students this, I always think that in the first 2 years of a job, you learn more than the 4 years of your undergrad. Would you agree with that? And how did that go?
Oh, absolutely. I think what's kind of interesting about going from college coding to professional is just the scenarios that you talk about in college and kind of the load that you might be dealing with, where you're developing code in college and you're using an API that you're hitting two times, three times to really test it out, um, and your code doesn't need to be amazing. You don't need to have good unit test coverage or anything like that. And when I started working professionally, I jumped in and we were immediately working on implementing a third-party tax software, which, if you know anything about taxes, you can't be wrong on taxes. So, not only was I a little bit figuring out, okay, this is the coding standards I've been using, and now I'm jumping into a team that expects 80% unit test coverage, and you need to make sure that everything's documented. So when you come back 3 years later, that you can know what you're doing. But also, hey, we calculate 1.1 million tax calls a day. How are you going to develop this to be able to handle that amount of load without crashing or producing incorrect tax results? So that was kind of, I think, the main thing. And some of my code that I wrote in my first month at DigiKey is out there, and some of the stuff that I don't love. Because you learn as you go. You develop standards. You see, oh, that works, but it also could have been better. But luckily, DigiKey is primarily C#, so my predominantly Java brain was able to adapt to that quickly, at least.
All right. Other questions? Hunter?
What's like the hardest project you've worked on, or like the hardest part of the project you worked on, and how did you handle it?
Okay, what's your most challenging project or thing that you've worked on, and how did it go? And what? Yeah.
Sure. So I'd say that the project that we actively went live with and are trying to fix up now has definitely been the hardest. And the hardest part of it was actually just dealing with the data. We had a system that's been 25 years old, and for the most part, we've just added on to it instead of refactoring. So when we wanted to load accounts into the third party, we had 25 years of band-aid fixes that we had to deal with to determine what was actually supposed to load in. And we ended up writing extract processes that ran for 8 hours straight, just crunching numbers and trying to clean up as much data as it could before going into the third party. Beyond that, with the project, because we were moving toward an eventing architecture, which is a very different paradigm than we were used to, we learned a lot of lessons there that we maybe hadn't had a whole lot of experience with before. Because, when you're using an API, you call it, you get immediate feedback, and can know immediately if you were successful or not. Where eventing, you have to have kind of some monitors in place and make sure that, hey, I produced a message saying that this order was placed, but did everything happen beyond there? Did we authorize with our credit card? Did this make it to the warehouse? And that's been a lot of lessons learned with doing that at a larger scale.
Right. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, so what would you say are the most significant challenges in handling legacy code in a system that is 25 years old?
Yeah, so what are the challenges in handling legacy code? And again, so was this C# code? And yeah, how did that go?
So most of our legacy code is written in C++, and it was actually originally C that was run through an automatic converter before I joined DigiKey. And it was a code base that was so large that we couldn't buy servers large enough for it. So it was code that had been split apart rapidly and just kind of glued together. There are so many gotchas when it comes to legacy code. We'd make a change that shouldn't have had any or that shouldn't have affected anything else, and suddenly we'd find, hey, the warehouse has been down for an hour. What did you do? And you'd find that, like, oh, why do you rely on that data? It's 30 years of, well, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. So that's been the big thing with this, is that to move to a modern system, you have to get people to stop using your legacy code. So a lot of research was being done to like dig through the little bit of details of like, okay, it's doing this, it works, but why does it do it? And that was many sleepless nights spent doing that. So we definitely are trying to move away from legacy, but sometimes you deal with 30 years of a little bit of band-aids.
All right. Another question?
It looks like there's one online.
Okay. Where's our chat? Okay. Yeah. How about AI? Do you use AI for coding or anything like that in your job?
A little bit. I really like to volunteer for new technologies. So we recently have been playing around with GitHub Copilot. And it's been okay. I find that it's really good when you're using it to supplement, like, hey, I've written this method. Are there any gotchas that you notice that I'm missing? You know, oh, there's a chance that a null could come through here and blow up, or hey, you wrote this in 4 lines, and if you could actually condense it down to two, it works pretty well for that kind of stuff. I found that the more we rely on it, though, the harder it becomes. Where if you're picking up something like Blazor and you just kind of use it to output a bunch of stuff, and you don't really understand what it's doing or why it's making the decisions it is, it's kind of hard to jump from relying on the AI to actually being a productive developer. So I've ended up like I've disabled most of like the autocomplete stuff and just use it more as kind of a chat bot of, hey, I want another look through this. What do you think of the code that I've written?
All right, sounds good. Alex, did you have a question?
Yeah, how long did they have him work in the office before they let him go remote?
So yeah, how did the remote transition? Did you start remote? Did you work in the office for a while? How did that go?
Yeah, so luckily, as a company, we were pretty well suited to go remote when the pandemic really hit, because we couldn't really get desktops that were powerful enough to develop our legacy software. So a lot of us would basically sit down at kind of a thin client, computer with not a lot of resources, and just remote into some more powerful servers. So then, when the pandemic hit, we pretty rapidly, like I was in the cities when the third case ever was there, and the team was like, "Yeah, do you want to stay home?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'll stay home and remote in." And pretty quickly, the company transitioned to being fully remote, which was pretty beneficial. And they said, "Hey, move where you want within reason within the state." And then it's kind of recently they've done a little bit of more return to office sort of things with the exemption of you have to be near an office. So I haven't been super affected by that. But yeah, we were pretty lucky when 2020 kind of came around that we were able to quickly get everyone onto remote hardware so we could continue doing our jobs.
I see online question about housing. So I believe you provide housing for interns in the summer there in Thief River Falls. Do they provide housing for full-time faculty? Did they buy you a house, Owen? Or are you still
No.
in a garage there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason I have a virtual background. I mean, no one will know fully where I'm at. I actually didn't know that we offered housing for interns. That's super cool. I know that at least when I moved 5 years ago, they offered kind of like reimbursement for some of your moving costs. I think I ended up like just sending them the bill for the U-Haul that I utilized, but I don't think they offer free housing as far as I know.
Okay, yeah, I would be surprised. I know they do provide some summer stuff for interns. Okay, David?
You mentioned code Copilot, but I'm wondering if there are non-large language model uses that DigiKey does for using AI like LSTM to predict sales over given order, for example.
Yeah, so as far as AI goes, do you know if you use AI for not just for helping write code, but is there any AI used to predict sales or stuff like that? Inside models that are used inside DigiKey software to do stuff.
It wouldn't surprise me if we were using it to predict sales. It's been a little bit of a slower rollout, I think, within the company. We've recently onboarded to help with ticket management, to kind of give users some tips and tricks to try before really escalating to an IT department. Knowing DigiKey, though, I am sure, much like every company out there, they are looking to utilize that more, and maybe they are, and I just haven't been super aware of it yet.
Okay. How about one last question before we wrap up here? Yeah. Johnny?
1 week sprints, how big are tickets usually?
Yeah, so do you do 1 week sprints and then how do you measure, yeah, how your tickets and the size of stuff?
Sure. Yep, we do utilize 1 week sprints. And every team is different on effort, but we typically target about around 30 effort points for our PBIs. And when it comes to tickets, we've gone back and forth on how to really represent it because sometimes you end up with a week where you spend most of your time dealing with tickets. And depending on when it is, like I think currently we just leave it unefforted and just kind of have like a gut check of yeah, we didn't finish this PBI because we were spending way too much time in tickets. At certain times, we have retroactively put an effort on, like, oh yeah, that seemed about an 8 level of effort was put into tickets this week. And we kind of go back and forth on it depending on the Scrum Master and how we're feeling at the time. But currently, it's just kind of a gut check of yeah, there's a lot of tasks that really were. Oh, we do have a PBI that's dedicated to tickets to say, oh, we're currently dealing with 12 tickets, just as kind of like a visual of what we're actively working on.
Okay. Well, thank you for visiting, giving us our some time here. We really appreciate it. It's good to hear from the real world. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
let's see. How do I stop sharing here? Okay. Well, yes, we'll see you and then we'll compare you let you know when Wilson comes next week, how that goes. So okay,
Sounds
well, say
perfect.
goodbye to Owen.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Okay, we're ending this.